took a very short time for normality to return to the Red Keep after the end of the siege of Maegor's Holdfast and the attempt to assassinate King Aegon III. But while this normality resumed, it was among a sea of new faces of those who filled the places of the men who died during the siege and investigation into the attempt on the king's life. But the mood and air did seem lighter in the Red Keep during this time after the relative tension within the court in the aftermath of the Dance of the Dragons, and later into the troubled regency of Aegon. It began to lift with the coming of these new younger faces to court. Despite this new dawn at court, King Aegon III was still his gloomy self and was hardly ever seen outside of his chambers. His brother, Prince Viserys, on the other hand, was very different, taking full part in court life, often sitting in the small council and consulting with his brother's regents. The new hand of the king, selected by the so-called Great Council of Lords, Lord Torrhen Manderly of White Harbour, began at once to tend to the business of the fractured and damaged realm. But like every hand of the king, back to the first, Orys Baratheon, his job was never going to be an easy or straightforward one. His task was a daunting one, and not one any hand would wish to begin their rule with: to sit judgment at the trials of those accused of poisoning Gaemon Powhair, the best friend and cupbearer of the king, and those plotting treason against the king. No fewer than 42 people stood accused, some playing large roles while others minor, perhaps not even knowing the full extent of their role. For those men and women named by Lord Graceford had in turn named others when questioned sharply, almost doubling the number of plotters in total. 16 had fled the city, and 8 had died during the chaos of the investigation, leaving 18 to be judged by the new hand. 13 of those accused had already confessed to some degree of involvement or some other related crime, for the king's inquisitors were most persuasive. Not surprising given their feared reputation among the lords of Westeros and the small folk alike. It is said they could discover the secret of any man, and they had several undesirable methods at their disposal. However, it is claimed by some at the Citadel that the inquisitors fostered this reputation of fear themselves, finding that alone would be enough to convince most men to speak the truth. However, 5 continued to insist upon their innocence, declaring they had truly believed the treason to be Lord Rowan's, and thus had joined the plot to save his grace from the Lyseni who meant to kill him. The trials lasted 33 days. Prince Viserys was present throughout, often accompanied by his wife, the Lady Lara, her belly swelling with their second child, and their son Aegon with his wet nurse. Given the nature of the accusations against Lady Lara in particular, it was felt important by Prince Viserys she should be present at the trials to ensure any who doubted that she was a loyal member of the royal family. Aegon joined the proceedings only 3 times, but even then it took much persuasion from his brother Prince Viserys to pry him from his chamber. But he did attend on the days that judgment was pronounced upon Garth Long, George Graceford and Septon Bernard. He showed no interest in the rest at all, and it is claimed he never asked about their fates. Queen Daenerys, still recovering from the siege in Maegor's Holdfast, did not attend at all. It was noted in the court records that Viserys showed much authority during the trials, with some comparing him to a young King Jaehaerys in the manner he engaged politics at such a young age. Sir Garth and Lord Graceford were condemned to die, but both chose to take the black instead. Lord Manderly decreed that they should be put aboard the next ship to White Harbour, from whence they could be taken to the wall. The High Septon had written to ask clemency for Septon Bernard, that he might atone for his sins through prayer, contemplation, and good works, so Manderly spared him from the headsman's axe. Instead, Bernard was gelded and commanded to walk barefoot from King's Landing to Old Town, with his manhood hung about his neck. If he survives, his High Holiness may make what use of him as he will, the hand decreed. Bernard did live, and spent the rest of his life as a scribe, copying holy books at the Starry Sept under a vow of silence. There were some who felt that given the depths of their treason, their punishments did not suit the crime. The Goldcloaks, who had been accused and taken, chose to emulate Sir Garth and Lord Graceford's taking of the black, in preference to losing their heads. The same choice was made by the surviving members of the Fingers, but Sir Victor Wriothesley, once the king's justice, stood upon his rights as an anointed knight to demand trial by battle, that I might prove my innocence by wager of my body in the sights of gods and men. Sir Garth Long, first and foremost of those who had named Wriothesley part of the plot, was duly brought back to court to face him. "You always were a bloody fool, Victor," Sir Garth said. When his long sword was placed into his hand, the former Master-at-Arms dispatched the former headsman quickly, then turned with a smile to the condemned in the back of the throne room and asked if anyone else was willing to face him. The most troubling cases of all were those of the 3 women who stood accused, all of them highborn ladies, and attendants to the Queen. Lucinda Penrose, she who had been attacked whilst hawking before the Maiden's Day ball, admitting to wanting Daenerys dead, saying, "If my nose had not been slit, it would be her serving me, not me serving her. No man will have me now because of her." Cassandra Baratheon confessed that she had often shared a bed with Sir Mervyn Flowers, and sometimes at Sir Mervyn's behest with Tesserio the Tiger, but only when he asked it of me. When William Stackspear suggested that perhaps she was part of the reward the Volantine had been promised, Lady Cassandra burst into tears. Yet even her confession paled beside that of Lady Priscilla Hogg, a sad and somewhat simple girl of 14, stout and short and plain of face, who had somewhat convinced herself of the notion that Prince Viserys would marry her if only if Lara of Lys was dead. "He smiles at me whenever he sees me," she told the court, "and once when he passed me on the steps, his shoulder brushed against my bosom." Lord Manderly, Grand Maester Munkin, and the regents questioned the three women closely, trying to elicit the name of a fourth woman, hitherto unmentioned. Lady Clarence Osgrey, widowed aunt of Lord Unwin Peake, Lady Clarice, supervised all of Queen Daenerys' maids, companions and attendants, as she did Queen Jaehaerys' ladies before them, and was well acquainted with many of the confessed conspirators. The full mushroom claims that she and George Graceford were lovers, and suggesting that her ladyship was so aroused by torture that she sometimes joined the Lord Confessor in the dungeons to assist him with his work. If she had been involved, it was likely Unwin Peake had as well. All their probing proved to no avail, however, and when Lord Torrhen asked bluntly whether Lady Clarice had been complicit, all three of the condemned women could only shake their head. Though unquestionably part of the conspiracy, the roles played by the three women had been comparatively minor. For that reason, and on account of their gender, Lord Manderly and the regents chose to show them mercy. Lucinda Penrose and Priscilla Hogg were condemned to have their noses cut off, with the understanding that this punishment would be stayed should they give themselves to the faith, so long as they remained true to their vows. Cassandra Baratheon's high birth spared her the same punishment. She was, after all, the late Lord Boris's eldest child, and sister to the present Lord of Storm's End, and had once been betrothed to King Aegon II. Though her mother, Lady Elendra, was not well enough to attend the trials, she had sent 3 of her sons' bannermen to speak for Storm's End. Through them, it was arranged for Lady Cassandra to wed a minor knight named Sir Walter Brownhill, who ruled a few hides of land on Cape Wrath from a castle often described as being made of mud and roots. Thrice bereft, Sir Walter had fathered 16 children by his previous wives, 13 of whom still live, with Lady Elendra's thought caring for these children and any additional sons or daughters that she herself might give Sir Walter would keep Lady Cassandra from plotting any further treasons. And so it did.